Hello, everyone. Tonight we're diving into a story that begins with a stiff chair, a black funeral dress, and a sentence that shattered the last piece of who I thought I was. Imagine sitting in a room that smells like old leather and stale disappointment, the kind of place where the curtains haven't moved in years and the silence is only broken by the soft click of a lawyer's pen. That was me 3 days after burying the man I loved for 42 years. My hands folded neatly in my lap, pretending they weren't trembling. Across from me sat my son Quinn, eyes cast downward, and beside him, Maisie, my daughter-in-law, filing her perfect nails like this was a nuisance she barely had time for. And then the lawyer read the words. To my beloved wife Mildred, I leave the ranch property on Willow Creek Road. Before he could continue, Maisie sighed loud and theatrical. Oh, for crying out loud, she muttered. Just get rid of that old dump and come live with us. You can help with the kids and actually be useful for once. Useful. So before you get too comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And please, drop your city and local time in the comments below. I want to know just how far this story will travel. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe let a little white noise play in the background. And let's begin tonight's journey together. I remember my breath catching in my throat as I looked at Quinn. My son, my only child. He didn't say a word in my defense, not a single syllable, just stared at his palms like he wished he could disappear into them. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, continued droning on, slicing my life into neat little parts like a butcher with inheritance instead of meat. Investment accounts, real estate, insurance, all neatly parcelled out. Maisie perked up then. Finally, something worth her time. I watched them discuss my life like I was a cracked teacup nobody wanted to drink from anymore. That house, where I raised Quinn, where I cooked Levi's favourite pot roast every Sunday, where we built snowmen and cried through report cards, it was all being handed away like junk from a garage sale. And then came the final blow. Maisie stood up, smoothing her pencil skirt like she was wrapping up a business meeting. Well, Mildred, she said, voice sugar-laced with venom. I guess that settles it. Get out of our lives and go play farmer at that old ranch. Maybe the isolation will give you time to think about all the ways you failed as a mother. I didn't cry. Not then. Not in front of them. But inside, something tore clean down the middle. Failed as a mother, I had given everything to that boy. Double shifts at the diner, skipped doctor appointments, worn out shoes so he could have new cleats, and now he couldn't even look me in the eye. I understand, I whispered. My voice felt like paper thin, ready to tear. Maisie smirked. Don't forget to take all those old photos and knickknacks. We're redecorating anyway. 40 years of memories, reduced to clutter. When I stepped outside, the world felt different, lighter somehow, but not in a good way, like gravity had given up on me too. Quinn didn't come out to say goodbye. Of course he didn't, and when I drove off, I saw Maisie watching from the window, arms crossed like she was finally rid of the last eyesore on her perfect suburban canvas. The ranch was 40 minutes outside of town. Dirt road, potholes, more weeds than grass. Levi had inherited it but never touched it. Too many memories, he'd say, which I thought was sentimental. Now I wonder if it was just guilt. I found the key under the loose porch board right where Levi always kept it. The house creaked like it hadn't breathed in years. Everything smelled like dust and lost time. I sat down in what used to be a living room and finally let myself cry. Not funeral tears, not the quiet kind. These were raw, broken sobs, the kind that make your chest ache and your hands shake. I wasn't just grieving Levi. I was grieving myself. The woman I used to be, the one they erased with a lawyer's letter and a designer skirt. And somewhere between those sobs, I made a promise to myself. I would not be forgotten. I would not rot in this place like they hoped I would. What I didn't know then was that buried beneath my feet, beneath the dust, the silence, and the bones of a life they tried to cast aside was the very thing that would make my phone ring 62 times. And I wouldn't answer it once. The ranch groaned with its own memories, every floorboard, every draft through the windows, whispered someone else's past. I spent my first night in the front bedroom, curled under a blanket that smelled like cedar and old paper, waking up every hour to silence so thick it felt like a second skin. You ever been so alone that even the birds seem to avoid you? By the second day, I stopped waiting for a phone call. They weren't going to call, and I wasn't going to beg. Instead, I did something radical for a grieving widow. I cleaned. Not light dusting, either. I scrubbed years off the walls, peeled back mildew and spider webs like layers of grief. I moved from room to room like a woman possessed because, let's be honest, I kind of was, possessed by the need to not fall apart. Cleaning gave my hands something to do while my heart cracked in silence. I started with the kitchen. That room had always grounded me, and now it needed grounding itself, under the floor mat, a loose board tilted upward. Levi used to joke about the creaky pantry floor, but I never imagined he meant it literally. I pried it open with a butter knife, half expecting to find a mouse. Instead, I found a metal box, dented, rusted at the edges, but locked tight with a latch that snapped open with a click that echoed too loudly. Inside were letters, tied with string-faded paper, ink that had bled into the fibres like tears. Spanish. My Spanish is rusty, but I understood enough. Mi amor eterno, my eternal love. These weren't love letters to Levi. They were written to someone named Samuel, Levi's grandfather. The handwriting was elegant, the tone poetic, and the words haunting. There was talk of a secret, of land surveys, and get this, el tesoro bajo nuestros pies, the treasure beneath our feet. I pressed the pages to my chest and just sat there for a long while, the way people do when they realize they've stumbled into someone else's unfinished story. There was a photo tucked in with the letters, a beautiful young woman with dark curls and kind eyes, standing next to a tall man with Levi's chin and Levi's shoulders. The resemblance was uncanny. This was Elena. She wasn't mentioned in any of Levi's stories, never brought up at Thanksgiving, but the way she looked at Samuel in that photo, God, it was the kind of look you spend your whole life hoping someone gives you once. I placed the letters gently on the table, careful not to crease history. Here's a strange fact for you. Most of the land in this part of the county was part of old mining claims during the mid-20th century. People thought they'd strike it rich on copper or silver. Most didn't, but that phrase, the treasure beneath our feet, kept ringing in my ears like wind chimes in a storm. I needed answers, not from Quinn, not from Maisie, obviously, but from someone who remembered when memories were kept in photo albums, not cloud drives. So I called Ruth Peaton. Ruth is 90 if she's a day, lives in the same house she was born in, and has a memory like a locked filing cabinet. I hadn't spoken to her in years, not since Maisie started spreading her own version of truth around town like fertilizer on a lawn full of judgmental roses. When Ruth answered, her voice was like gravel mixed with honey. Mildred Morrison, well, butter my biscuits. I thought you'd run off to Florida by now. I laughed for the first time in days. I found something at the ranch, some letters, about mining claims from a woman named Elena. The other end of the line went quiet. Then Ruth said something I'll never forget. "Oh, honey, you found the ghosts." She told me everything. Samuel Morrison had filed for copper and silver claims back in the 1940s, spent years mapping the land, filing paperwork, working the veins with hand tools and grit. And during the war, he fell in love with a Mexican school teacher, Elena Delgado. They married, had a child on the way, and then tragedy. Elena died giving birth. Samuel was never the same. He sealed off the tunnel he'd dug, packed up the mining reports, and spent the rest of his life guarding the ranch like it was sacred. Everyone thought he was a fool, Ruth said, but I always believed he found something under that land. He just didn't want anyone else to touch it after Elena passed, and I hung up and stared at the kitchen floor for a long while. What was Levi doing keeping all of this from me? He'd inherited this place, and yet never told me about the mining history, the lost love, the letters. And then a chilling thought crept in. What if Maisie had known? What if she'd suspected something and pushed for the ranch because she thought it was worthless? What if Levi had protected me in the only way he knew how, by not saying anything at all? I spent the rest of the evening in the study. Levi's grandfather had a desk in their oak, heavy and full of dust. I found maps, geological charts, letters with government letterheads, and at the bottom of one drawer a small velvet pouch with a chunk of green-veined rock. I'm no geologist, but I recognised copper when I saw it. And suddenly, the weight of what I was sitting on hit me. Not just emotional weight. Real value. They'd sent me here thinking it was exile. But this ranch was the ace Levi had hidden in his sleeve. And I was holding it now. The next morning, I woke up before the sun, not because I couldn't sleep, but because I couldn't wait. That's a strange sentence for a grieving widow, isn't it? But something had shifted in me. I wasn't waking up to sadness anymore. I was waking up to mystery, to purpose, to copper veins beneath my floorboards and a love story buried in Spanish ink. I poured myself a cup of weak coffee and opened the kitchen window to let in the breeze. It carried the scent of juniper and dust and something else possibility. I made a list. A real one. Not the kind I used to scribble on napkins while waiting tables during Levi's lean years. This was a grown woman's list, the kind you make when you've decided you're not going to live the rest of your life as a footnote. Investigate the maps. Search the rest of the ranch. See what Levi was hiding and from whom. The first map I unfolded was dated 1947. The paper was brittle, but the ink still clear. It showed the property boundary of the ranch and 5 core sites marked with red X's. There were notes in the margins depths, mineral types, moisture content. Someone had spent a lot of time underground. In one corner, in faint pencil, was a phrase that gave me goosebumps: Elena's passage, sealed 1953. I wasn't sure what I'd expected to find when I came to the ranch. Certainly not a tunnel named after a long-dead schoolteacher, but there it was. I searched every inch of the house that day, behind loose wall panels, beneath rug corners, even inside the old bread box. I found more documents, more photographs, a black and white image of Levi as a boy, standing beside his grandfather, both of them holding pickaxes like proud miners. And in the coat closet of the master bedroom, I found something I hadn't expected: a false panel. It was expertly done, covered in wallpaper to match the rest of the interior. When I pried it loose, I discovered a narrow compartment stuffed with oilcloth bundles. Inside them, survey reports, geological assays from as recent as the 1970s. These weren't historical curiosities, they were proof, concrete evaluations of copper deposits, including one marked confidential in big red letters. Levi's handwriting ran in the margins, numbers, calculations, even a few phone numbers, and the phrase SW Mining, ask for Torres. And then came the envelope that knocked the wind out of me. A formal offer. Typed, dated 6 months before Levi died. From Southwestern Mining Corporation. An offer to lease the mineral rights beneath the ranch for $2 million up front, and royalties thereafter. Levi had never responded. Not a yes, not a no, just silence. Why? Why hadn't he told me? That evening, as the light turned the porch gold and the shadows grew long across the fields, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by evidence of a life Levi had lived in parallel to mine, a life of secrets, of protective silence, of quietly shielding me from the ugly parts of the world, or maybe the greedy parts of our family. I poured myself a glass of the cheap red wine I found in the pantry and stared at my phone. Quinn had called 5 times that day, left 2 voicemails. I hadn't answered. The old me would have rushed to call him back, would have said, "Of course, sweetheart," and driven into town to help with whatever crisis he and Maisie had manufactured this week. But the woman holding the mineral rights to millions of dollars, she didn't jump when people snapped their fingers. She sipped her wine and made another list. Because here's the thing, they never tell you about aging if you're lucky. You learn to stop chasing people who only look at you when they need something. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I planned. I opened my laptop. Yes, I know how to use one. Thank you very much. And I searched for mineral rights lawyer in Colorado. Within an hour, I had 4 names saved. I also found Frank Torres, the name Levi had scrawled in the margin of that offer letter. He still worked at Southwestern Mining. A quick LinkedIn search confirmed it. For once, the internet wasn't just for cat videos and casserole recipes. I drafted an email. Subject line, Willow Creek Property, Potential Lease. I signed it Mildred Morrison, surviving spouse of Levi Morrison. And I slept like a rock that night, better than I had in months, maybe years. Now, before I continue, here's your weird fact for this part. Did you know copper was once called the red gold because of how essential it is to modern life? It's in our wires, our phones, our plumbing, even the brakes on electric cars. Turns out, I wasn't living on a forgotten ranch. I was sitting on the 21st century version of gold. The next morning, I woke to an email reply. A woman named Sarah Chen had responded on behalf of Frank Torres. She said they'd been hoping someone from the Morrison family would reach out. The original offer still stood, and they were willing to schedule a site visit. I couldn't help but smile as I reread her words. Meanwhile, my phone kept buzzing with Quinn's name. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I finally unblocked his number not to talk, just to see what he'd sent. 7 missed calls. 1 text from Maisie. We need to talk about the ranch. You've had your time. It's time to think about what's fair for the whole family. The gall. I almost laughed. But instead, I turned off the phone and went to sweep the porch. Because nothing says peace like ignoring a narcissist while holding all the cards. I don't remember ever looking forward to a meeting as much as I did that one with Southwestern Mining. There's something exhilarating about being underestimated for so long and then realizing quietly, strategically, that you're the one sitting on the checkmate. I woke up early, made myself a strong cup of coffee, and even put on lipstick for the first time in months. Not for anyone else, just for me. The mirror showed the same face I'd known for 69 years, only sharper now, like someone who had finally stopped asking for permission to matter. The white pickup truck rolled up just before 10 a.m., kicking dust into the morning sun. Out stepped two people, Frank Torres, a calm, middle-aged man with a clipboard and no-nonsense boots, and Sarah Chen, whose sharp eyes scanned the ranch like she was already measuring its worth. "Mrs. Morrison," Frank said, extending a hand. "Thank you for having us. I'm sorry for your loss. Levi was a smart man." I nodded politely. "Thank you." I think he was smarter than even I realised. We toured the property. Sarah carried a tablet and took photos of the soil, rocks, and slopes. Frank stopped every so often to explain what they were seeing: mineral lines, water tables, access routes. When we reached the back edge of the property, Frank gestured toward the rise in the land. "That seam," he said. "It's one of the most promising copper veins in the region. We call this a high-grade deposit. It could easily yield returns for decades." I kept my smile neutral, but inside fireworks. Back at the house, they pulled out the formal offer. Frank cleared his throat. "We're prepared to offer you $4 million up front for a 20-year lease. In addition, you'd receive quarterly royalties conservatively estimated at $300,000 to $500,000 per quarter." I took the folder and gave a small nod. "I'll have my lawyer look it over, but I'm interested." Sarah smiled, clearly impressed. "Most people in your position are overwhelmed. You seem prepared." "I've had practice," I said, cleaning up after people who thought I was disposable. Later that afternoon, after they left, I placed the documents on the kitchen table next to a fresh notebook labelled "My Life, My Rules." Here's the thing about sudden power: it doesn't change you, it reveals you, turns the volume up on who you already were. And I was done being the family doormat. While the ink on my future dried, Quinn's calls turned frantic. That night, my phone buzzed 15 times before 9 p.m. I didn't pick up. The next morning, I finally answered. "Mum?" Quinn gasped. "Thank God. Look, something's happened. We need to talk." "Of course you do." He told me they'd received a letter from the county, something about mineral rights, something about a boundary issue from the original property deed. Turns out, when Levi's grandfather sold off part of the land years ago, he never included the mineral rights in the transfer. The land Quinn and Maisie had inherited, sitting on top of minerals I now owned. The irony could have powered a small town. "Mum," Quinn said, "this is serious. We might have to refinance the house. Maisie's really stressed. And the kids, well, you know." "Oh," I said, "are they still redecorating?" There was a pause. "We might need your help." "Of course you do." He hesitated. 50,000 would really help us stabilise things. Let me tell you something. Nothing clarifies memory like being asked for money by someone who told you to get out of their lives. I didn't shout, didn't cry. I simply asked, "Quinn, are you happy with Maisie?" "What, Mum? What does that have to do with—" "Everything," I interrupted. "Because when someone truly loves you, they don't make you choose between love and dignity. They don't treat your mother like a broken appliance." He was silent, for once. I let it stretch. "You were 8, I said softly. "Wanted a tree house. Your father said no. Too dangerous, too expensive. but I picked up an extra shift at the diner and bought the wood myself. You remember that? You. He did. Of course he did. That's who I've always been. Quinn, someone who showed up for you. I won't be your safety net anymore. Another pause. Then his voice dropped into a whisper. What do you want me to do? Be the man I raised. I hung up, not out of cruelty, but because I'd already said enough. That evening, I signed the lease. $4 million, wire transfer within 30 days, royalties to follow. A financial advisor named Marcus would be managing my portfolio. Patricia Wells, my new attorney, would be handling the tax structure. Levi would have been proud, maybe even shocked. A weird fact for this chapter in some states: surface rights and mineral rights are legally separate. So you can own a house but not the copper underneath it. Guess which state I live in? By bedtime, I felt lighter. Not because of the money, but because I'd finally stopped apologizing for existing. Outside, the windmill creaked like it was clapping for me, and for once, I clapped back. The basement had always felt like the kind of place where secrets went to rot. It was the one part of the house I hadn't touched yet, mostly because Levi used to wave me away from it like it was haunted. Nothing down there but dust and junk, he'd say, patting my shoulder. Don't waste your time. But I was learning that Levi had spent his life hiding things, not out of cruelty, but out of protection. And now that I was no longer a woman needing shelter, but a woman holding power, I decided to descend the creaky wooden stairs. It smelled like time had stopped: damp earth, rust, old wood. The flashlight beam cut through the dark, revealing stone foundation walls that seemed older than the house itself. The air was still, cool, and thick with the smell of forgotten things. And then I saw it. A tunnel. Propped up with timber beams, the entrance was narrow, no more than 4 feet tall. Not some random crawl space. It had been dug deliberately with expertise and care. A gentle wind came from it, carrying a scent of wet minerals and possibility. I didn't step in, not yet, but I stood at the mouth of it, pulse racing. Elena's passage. That phrase from the map whispered back into my head. To the right, behind some old crates, I found something heavier than dust wooden boxes packed with rock samples wrapped in canvas. Even with my limited knowledge, I recognized the streaks of green and blue copper. The rocks were dense and glittering where light hit just right. Some had labels vein 2B, depth 40 mem, sample for assay. And tucked beneath one crate, inside a leather portfolio that had survived decades thanks to careful wrapping, were the documents that changed everything. Geological surveys, professional ones, dated just 5 years ago. I sat on the basement floor, dirt staining my jeans, and read through them in a daze. Levi had hired Morrison Geological Associates under his grandfather's name to evaluate the land in secret. The reports confirmed what I'd suspected. This wasn't some forgotten corner of Colorado. It was a copper-rich property with the potential to generate millions in revenue. One study even outlined environmental protection strategies, low-impact extraction, community benefits. Levi had done the homework. But the final page, the one that really got me, was handwritten, a letter in Levi's looping scrawl. Mildred deserves better than what I gave her. This is her chance. Don't let that woman ruin what we built. That woman, he couldn't even say Maisie's name. And honestly, I respected the restraint. He had been planning something, a legacy, maybe, a shield. He knew Maisie would try to sink her nails into anything left behind, and he'd locked this away like a message in a bottle, trusting I'd find it when the time was right. I sat in that basement a long time, and when I finally climbed the stairs back to the kitchen, I wasn't just a widow anymore. I wasn't a burden or a footnote or a woman shuffled off to the side of her own life. I was the heir to something they couldn't touch. I was Levi's secret weapon. That night, I didn't sleep much. I paced the house, rereading everything, planning. The next morning, I received a voicemail from Quinn. Not a plea this time, just desperation, trying to act casual. "Mum, I think we got off on the wrong foot. Maisie wants to come out and see the ranch, maybe bring the kids. Let's talk. It's been too long." I didn't call him back. Instead, I emailed Patricia Wells, asking her to draw up protections on the lease. I wanted everything airtight, bulletproof. A strange little fact for today: mineral leases, once finalised, are practically irreversible. Once that ink dries, the surface owners can't stop the mining activity unless they have legal rights to do so. Guess who has those rights? Not Quinn. And certainly not Maisie. I spent the rest of the day organising Levi's papers, sorting them into labelled binders. And yes, I used coloured tabs. I may be a grandmother, but I am still terrifyingly efficient when motivated. Around sunset, I returned to the tunnel. I stood at the edge, flashlight in one hand, the other resting against the wooden beam. I didn't go in, I just looked, let the cool air hit my face. I whispered, "Thank you, Levi." Then I locked the basement door, not out of fear, out of respect. Some treasures deserve a formal entrance. That night, while sipping tea on the porch, I got a text from Maisie. "We're coming Saturday. The kids miss their grandmother. Please be civil." Civil? She had called me a failure, dismissed me like a waitress at a cheap diner, and now she wanted civility. I didn't reply. Instead, I highlighted one section of the lease agreement. Any attempts by outside parties to influence operations without legal ownership will result in full termination of site access. Saturday was going to be interesting. And I was going to wear red. They arrived late Saturday morning in a cloud of entitlement and luxury SUV exhaust. I watched from the kitchen window as Maisie stepped out, first heels too high for dirt, sunglasses too large for humility. Quinn trailed behind her, carrying a tote bag with live, laugh, love stitched on the side, and looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. The kids didn't come. Of course they didn't. This wasn't a family visit. This was a negotiation. I met them on the porch, wearing my cleanest jeans, a pressed shirt, and my grandmother's old red scarf tied around my neck like armour. Not flashy, just enough to say, "I'm not here to play house." "Mum," Quinn started, "thanks for seeing us." "I didn't invite you," I said flatly, "but you're here, so let's get this over with." Maisie blinked, then forced a smile so brittle it could have cracked in half. "We were hoping to take a look around. You know, reconnect. The ranch is part of the family, after all." I gestured toward the field. "Be my guest. Watch your step. The land's more valuable than it looks." We walked in silence toward the edge of the property, where survey flags still marked the areas the geologists had examined. Maisie paused beside one, crossing her arms. "Look, Mildred," she said, her voice laced with artificial concern. "I get it. You've been overwhelmed, all alone, confused. But this lease thing, it's too big for one person. You need help. I tilted my head. Do I? You could jeopardize the whole deal if you don't handle it properly. Legal mistakes, tax issues. It's complicated. We just want what's best for everyone. There it was, wrapped in concern, seasoned with manipulation, served on a platter of family unity. Quinn chimed in, trying for gentle. We've been doing a lot of thinking. Mum, maybe we can create a trust. Pool the ranch and our home together, use the royalties to support the whole family. And where would I live in this arrangement, I asked, already knowing. Maisie beamed. We thought we could build you a little apartment over the garage. It'd be cosy, private. You'd be close to the grandkids. The audacity. An apartment over the garage, after exiling me to a ranch they thought was worthless. I looked at Quinn, and this is your idea of making things right. He had the decency to look ashamed. It's a start, isn't it? No, I said softly. It's an ending. We walked back in silence. At the porch, I turned to face them. 3 weeks ago, you both told me to get out of your lives. You handed me this ranch like it was a punishment, and now, because it turned out to be valuable, you've decided I'm useful again. Maisie stiffened. That's not what this is. Isn't it? I stepped closer, because if I hadn't found those reports, if I hadn't reached out to the mining company, would you be standing here with that smile on your face and blueprints for a garage apartment in your purse? Neither answered. I continued, voice steady. I've signed the lease. The deal is done. The royalties are mine, and your house. It's sitting on land whose mineral rights belong to me, so unless you'd like to start paying me rent, I suggest you be careful where you plant your next flower bed. Quinn's mouth opened, closed. Maisie looked like she wanted to scream but didn't know which word to start with. I'm not your problem anymore. I finished, and you're not mine. They left in silence. Dust trailed behind their SUV like the tail of a retreating comet. I went back inside and made myself a sandwich, peanut butter and banana, because dignity tastes better with nostalgia. Here's your odd fact for today. Some copper deposits remain untouched for decades, simply because no one bothers to look. Hidden value, waiting for someone with eyes wide enough to see it. That was me. And while I was eating that sandwich, I started to laugh. Because the next time Maisie talked about her perfect suburban life, she'd have to acknowledge the fact that she paved her driveway over someone else's fortune, mine. The following week passed with the kind of quiet productivity that made me feel like I was planting a flag on my own life. I met with Patricia Wells in the city to finalise the lease's financial structuring. She handed me a new set of documents to open 2 trust accounts, one for quarterly royalty income and another for discretionary use. It's clean, she said, tapping the signature page. No back doors, no family loopholes. You're in full control. I nodded. That's the way I want it. She raised an eyebrow. Are you expecting trouble? I didn't answer right away. I just thought about Maisie's fixed smile and Quinn's broken silence. I thought about the way they'd sliced me out of their lives like expired cheese, only to come crawling back when the scent of copper hit their noses. I'm expecting strategy, I finally replied, and I play better when I know the rules. Back at the ranch, I hired a contractor recommended by the mining company to help restore the house. Not for resale, for me. This wasn't exile anymore. It was home base, and I wanted it to reflect who I was becoming. New roof, energy-efficient windows, a real office instead of a kitchen table stacked with paper, and a bathtub deep enough to erase 50 years of other people's expectations. Funny how no one visits when you stop being convenient. Maisie didn't text again, but Quinn, oh, he pivoted like a politician with a bad poll. Just checking in. Mum, kids miss you. Thinking about Christmas plans. Emma wants to send you something she drew. It might have worked if I hadn't seen the pattern. Quinn had always been a gentle boy. He cried during the Iron Giant and couldn't eat the school's meatloaf because he didn't like the texture of guilt. But somewhere between college and Maisie, he'd learned how to weaponize softness, how to make apologies with half his mouth while the other half waited for the deposit to clear. I didn't blame him entirely, but I wasn't going to fund the learning curve. Instead, I made another list. Open an education trust for Emma and Tommy. Draft my will with Patricia. Install a landline, a vintage one, just for fun. Quinn didn't know it yet, but I wasn't cutting them off. I was cutting them out. I'd still help the kids, quietly, anonymously. I wasn't going to punish a 9-year-old because her parents thought money grew on in-laws, but I wouldn't let Maisie or Quinn wrap their hands around this opportunity and squeeze it into a lifestyle upgrade. I was tired of funding egos. Here's your weird fact for today. Copper doesn't just conduct electricity, it kills bacteria. Hospitals line surfaces with it to prevent infections. It's both conduit and purifier. That was the ranch now, my purifier. Frank Torres visited again with Sarah Chen to begin prepping for extraction. They brought a small crew with soil testing equipment and drones that buzzed overhead like nosy hummingbirds. You're sitting on a hot seam, Frank told me, smiling like a man who knew his next bonus was secured. You could license this story to Netflix. I laughed, only if I get casting approval. Sarah handed me a new set of charts, each labelled with colourful terrain models. This section, she said, pointing to a green to orange gradient, has the highest ore concentration. We'll start here. By Q2 next year, we should see full-scale returns. Outside, bulldozers moved carefully around flagged zones. Frank said they'd keep operations as quiet as possible. I appreciated the courtesy, but honestly, I liked the sound. That low mechanical hum in the distance meant value was flowing. I stood at the fence line later that afternoon, watching the sun sink behind the hills, when I saw the flash of a camera. Someone had driven up the dirt road. Maisie. Alone. She was standing by her car, dressed in workout gear that had never seen a gym, holding her phone like it might capture leverage if she found the right angle. I didn't wave. I didn't yell. I walked back inside, poured a glass of lemonade, and wrote a note for Patricia. If Maisie Thompson or Quinn Morrison make any claim regarding the ranch or its assets, direct all communication to legal counsel. No exceptions. Then I made banana bread. Because revenge, when you bake it just right, smells like cinnamon and reclaiming your name. 2 days later, I received a manila envelope by certified mail. No return address, but I recognized the formatting immediately. Maisie's lawyer. Inside were 6 pages of legalese trying to dress itself up as a heartfelt plea. The language was absurd shared familial interest, historic emotional investment, reasonable expectations of inheritance. I scanned until I got to the highlighted portion. Our client believes that a verbal understanding existed between Mildred Morrison and her late husband Levi Morrison, ensuring that the Willow Creek Ranch would remain a shared family asset. I actually laughed. Maisie and Levi had barely spoken. She once told him that land ownership was a boomer delusion, and now she wanted to make a claim on the very same soil. Cute. I forwarded the documents to Patricia. She called me within the hour, her voice equal parts amused and irritated. "They don't have a leg to stand on," she said, "but we'll file a cease and desist anyway, and I'll start drafting a press release, just in case Maisie thinks going public will win her sympathy." Publicity. That was Maisie's next card. Sure enough, the following day, a local blog run by her yoga friend Amanda posted a saccharine little story titled "When Elders Forget, a Family Torn Apart by Greed." There was no name, but the clues were obvious to anyone with a nose for drama. She was like a second mother to me, the post read, until money changed her. It ended with a quote, "Some people would rather live alone with a checkbook than surrounded by love." I didn't respond. Instead, I invited Ruth, the town's oldest resident and the unofficial historian, over for tea. She showed up in her denim skirt, orthopedic sneakers, and a twinkle in her eye. "So, the fire's finally lit, huh?" "You could say that." We sat on the porch, drinking Earl Grey and eating slices of my banana bread. I told her everything. The tunnel, the maps, the lease. She wasn't surprised. "Levi's grandfather used to bring samples into town in secret," she said. "Told everyone it was firewood, but he was chasing veins." "Why didn't anyone else know?" Ruth smiled. "People see what they want, and Levi, he learned to hide what was precious. You were the only thing he couldn't bury." That hit me in the chest. I wasn't expecting it, but I held the words like a warm stone in my palm. "You know," Ruth said after a while, "when a woman reclaims what was hers all along, it's not greed, it's justice with better manners, man." I laughed. I might stitch that on a pillow. That night, I sat at my desk, yes, my actual desk now, and started writing a letter, not to Quinn, not to Maisie, to Emma and Tommy. I told them stories about the treehouse, about Levi's laugh when he spilled chili on his shirt every Thanksgiving, about the night Emma was born and how I sang Moon River while she slept in my arms. I didn't mention the lawsuit, but I added one thing at the end. "When you're older, this place will be here for you, not because your parents asked for it, but because I believe you'll treat it with love. And love, my dears, is never owed, it's chosen." Then I locked the letter in a drawer marked "to be mailed in 10 years. Here's your strange little fact today. Copper isn't just useful, it's beautiful. Artists use it for sculptures, jewellery, and intricate etchings. It's both currency and craft. That's what I wanted the ranch to become. Not just a source of income, but a place of meaning. The next morning, I received another voicemail from Quinn. His voice was shaking. "Mum, Maisie's gone too far. I didn't know she'd do that. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry." I replayed it once, then deleted it. Apologies are like confetti after a parade, pretty, but too late to sweep the streets clean. Instead of calling him back, I went to the garden, planted tomatoes, sang a little Patsy Cline to the soil. Because I may not control the past, but the harvest, that's all mine. The ranch buzzed with activity, now not just the whir of machinery from the mining crew, but the quiet, steady rhythm of a life being rebuilt on purpose. For once, it didn't feel like I was surviving something. I was choosing it, brick by brick, board by board, breath by breath. On Monday, Marcus, my new financial advisor, drove up from Denver to walk me through the updated projections. We sat at the kitchen table, now clear of paperwork and finally dressed in a fresh linen runner, with a bowl of oranges in the middle like I was on the cover of some rustic magazine titled Widow Wins. Marcus adjusted his glasses, tapping the laptop screen. After the first year, you're projected to earn close to $1.8 million in royalties annually. That's assuming copper prices remain where they are now, which is actually conservative. I stared at the numbers. It still hadn't sunk in. This wasn't a temporary uptick. This was legacy money, real security. Something Maisie and Quinn probably thought only existed on their side of the family tree. I'd like to set up a donor fund, I said, for single mothers in rural counties, something quiet, no plaques. He blinked, then smiled. We can absolutely make that happen. By Thursday, Patricia had finalised the new will. I made it very clear that Quinn and Maisie would inherit nothing, at least not directly. Everything would be held in a trust for Emma and Tommy, and only if they met very clear conditions: college, no criminal record, and 1 full year of public service, volunteer work, any cause of their choice. Character before cash, I told Patricia. She nodded. I wish more people thought like you. That afternoon, I sat on the porch with a cup of mint tea and watched the sun cast long shadows over the field. The mining team had moved their heavy machinery to the north end of the property, far enough that I couldn't hear the grind, but close enough that I could see the progress. Maisie hadn't posted another blog. Maybe someone told her slandering your husband's mother while trying to take her money wasn't the best PR move. Quinn, though, he came back. It was Friday, mid-morning, no warning this time, just the sound of tyres on gravel and a blue sedan that looked like it had seen better financial decisions. He got out slowly, holding a small box in his hands. No Maisie, no sunglasses, just him, looking like the boy I once packed peanut butter sandwiches for before school. Hi, Mum. I didn't say anything at first, just watched as he walked up the steps, eyes lowered. I know I shouldn't be here, but I need to say something, and give you this. He handed me the box. Inside was a photo album. Emma's drawings, school projects, a family picture where they were all smiling in front of a fireplace I'd never seen, probably in their too-perfect new house. I wanted you to know, he said quietly, that they miss you, that I miss you. My voice stayed even. What about Maisie? He looked away. She moved out last week. Said I was emotionally bankrupt. Maybe she's not wrong, I didn't offer him comfort. That's what he always expected, a bridge built from my back. I read your will, he added. Patricia sent me a courtesy copy. I understand. There was no bitterness in his voice, just exhaustion. I'm not asking for money, Mum. I want to start over. Now, I could have hugged him. I could have wept and invited him in and called this a happy ending. But life isn't a Hallmark movie. I had to be sure. So I said, you want to start over, Quinn, then go volunteer. Go work with someone who doesn't owe you kindness. Pick up trash. Deliver food, clean toilets, whatever it takes to learn humility. He blinked, clearly not expecting that. And after a year, I continued, if you still mean what you said, come back. We'll see. He nodded, slowly. That's fair. Then he turned and walked back to his car. And I let him. Here's your fact for today, copper. Over time, develops a patina, a blue-green layer that protects it from corrosion. It ages beautifully, even when left exposed. I hope that's what's happening to me. And maybe to him, too. Spring rolled in on a soft breeze, brushing against the ranch with wildflowers and the scent of fresh beginnings. The fields were alive again, not just with mining crews and quiet machines, but with something deeper, something that hummed under my skin. I'd started planting a real garden, not just tomatoes and herbs, but roses, red ones, the kind Levi always pretended not to like, but secretly photographed every time they bloomed. Emma sent me a postcard in her shaky cursive. Dear Grandma Millie, I'm reading Charlotte's Web, and I think the spider is brave like you. Dad says hi. I miss your banana bread. Love, Emma. I kept it on the fridge, next to a photo of me holding her as a baby. She had Levi's nose, stubborn and soft at the same time. One morning, just as the sun stretched across the porch railings, I received a call from Sarah Chen. Congratulations, she said with a smile in her voice. The first payment's been wired, and there's more coming. You're officially producing $426,000. That was the first quarter payout, just a fraction of what was expected for the year. I stared at the confirmation email for a long time, not because I was shocked, but because of how calm I felt. This wasn't chaos anymore. It was earned. I donated the first $100,000 to a non-profit that provided housing for displaced seniors. No press release, just a wire transfer and a handwritten note that read, "Everyone deserves a door that locks behind them and a kettle that whistles." Patricia updated my estate again. The ranch would remain in a conservation trust after I passed. No subdivisions, no chain stores, only educational partnerships, sustainable extraction, and protected wild zones. Levi would have loved that. As for Quinn, true to his word, he sent me an email every month. No begging, just updates. He was volunteering at a food bank, helping teach adult literacy classes. I didn't reply to most of them, but I read every one. Maisie filed for divorce. That, I read in the county notices. She kept the house, but not the land underneath it. I imagine it gnawed at her in the evenings, wondering if the ground itself resented her. But I no longer thought about her much. I'd built a new life, one where I woke up with purpose instead of grief, with coffee instead of dread. Here's a strange fact for your collection. Copper bracelets were once believed to relieve arthritis. No scientific proof, but people still wear them. Hoping, belief, it seems, is a kind of healing. Maybe I'd been wearing invisible copper all these years, carrying pain as protection. That Sunday, I hosted a dinner. Just a few neighbours, Ruth, Frank, and Sarah. Even the contractor who fixed my windows brought his beef and her famous peach cobbler. We sat on the porch beneath string lights, laughing, telling stories, eating too much. I felt full, not from food, but from restoration. Near the end of the evening, Frank raised a glass. "To the lady who turned rust into gold," he said, and made sure everyone knew she was never the side story, she was the whole damn book. They all clapped, but I just smiled. Because the truth was, I didn't need applause. I had peace. And the next morning, I wrote one final letter, not to Quinn, not to Emma, to myself. Dear Mildred, you were never a burden. You were a seed in the wrong season, but you grew anyway. I'm proud of you. Love, me. I sealed it in an envelope and tucked it in the same drawer that once held my grief. And for the first time in years, I opened the windows, let the breeze in, and danced barefoot across the floor to Billie Holiday. No one was watching, which made it even better. Word count 100. Soft ending. 300 words. Sometimes the greatest revenge is no revenge at all. Just living well, living free, You see, they thought they'd pushed me into exile, handed me an empty shell and called it mercy. But what they didn't realize was that solitude can be a forge. It burns away what's false, what's weak, what's been clinging on too long. They tried to make me feel small. Instead, they made me remember how big I truly was. The ranch, it gave me back more than money. It gave me back me. The quiet me, the bold me, the woman who used to hum while making tea and hadn't done that in over a decade. I think about Quinn sometimes. I hope his hands learn the weight of real work. I hope Emma grows up remembering the smell of banana bread and the sound of her grandmother's laugh. And I hope Maisie finds whatever mirror she keeps avoiding. But I don't dwell. Because there are roses to prune, pies to bake, letters to write, and mornings to stretch into slowly with no one rushing me. If you're watching this, and someone has made you feel replaceable, if they've cast you out thinking you'll break, remember this. Sometimes the dustiest corners hide the richest seams. And sometimes the quiet woman in the corner, she's the one holding the deed. So here's to you, whoever you are, wherever you are, may you find your copper, may you rise from the basement and walk into your power. And when they call you a leech, smile. And remind them, leeches only survive if you let them get close. But you've already closed the door.